This little guy is the Geekom AS6 Mini PC, and you guys can see it is tiny. Now, Geekom saw our videos on the M2 Mac Mini, and they reached out and said, hey, we have a mini PC that has a great price tag, a ton of features and performance, and we want you guys to check it out and compare it to the M2 Mac Mini and feature it on your channel. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, one thing that surprised me was the price tag, the specs, and the amount of upgradability that they packed in such a small package. So starting out with the external dimensions, you guys can see that the footprint is much smaller on the AS6 compared to the Mac Mini. Now, with that said, it is a little bit taller, but overall, the size is smaller. And on the back, there are actual mounting points where you can use their VESA adapter that is included in the box to mount it to the back of a monitor or mount it somewhere else so it stays out of the way. Now, I do want to mention that you do have an external power brick, so the power supply is external compared to internal on the Mac Mini. Now, as far as ports, this is where it gets a little bit crazy because on the M2 Mac Mini, here we have no ports on the front. You have to spend at least $2,000 for the Mac Studio in order to get that. Whereas the AS6 has your headphone and microphone port on the front. You have a full-on Thunderbolt port right here as well that can be connected to displays, and we have two super speed USBs along with that power button. Now, if we take a look at the back, that is quite a bit of ports here. Now, on the M2 Mac Mini, we have two 5 gigabit per second USBs. We have that HDMI, and then we have two Thunderbolt ports right here. We have your Ethernet port, and we have one single HDMI. Now, this HDMI is not HDMI 2.1. You have to spend at least $1,300, whereas with the AS6, we actually have two HDMIs, and those can support 4K 120, so it's HDMI 2.1. Now, the Mac Mini can support two displays, and that caps out the M2 chip. With the AMD processor that's in here and the graphics, we can support a ton of displays. So we have those two HDMIs, we also have a display port, and that Thunderbolt port that's also on the back. You don't have to just use it for storage or devices, that's also a display output. We also have 3 super speed regular USBs, and we have that Ethernet port. Now, on the M2 Mac Mini, it comes with 1 gigabit Ethernet unless you spend another $100. Whereas the AS6, well, it meets it somewhat in the middle because it's included in the price and it's 2.5 gig Ethernet. You can't get 10 gigabit, but it is upgraded from the factory. Now, internally, this is where it gets interesting. The AS6 actually comes with not 16 gigs, but 32 gigs of RAM. To get a comparable Mac Mini, you're gonna have to spend $1,400 to bring you up to 1 terabyte, and it caps at 24 gigs of unified memory, so that is unified. That is 1,400 bucks. How much does this AS6 cost? Well, right now you can get it for $749. And there's a lot of upgradability, which I will show you guys. Now, the Mini, of course, has the M2 chip that is unbinned, whereas the AS6 has the AMD R9 6900HX processor, along with AMD Radeon 680M graphics. Now, on the bottom of the AS6, we have 4 Phillips screws that are built into these rubber feet. Of course, the M2 Mac Mini is no longer upgradable. Of course, with PCs, even something as small as this AS6, we can actually unscrew the feet, and we are going to lift up this cover, and that just opened up our little mini PC. Now, as you guys see right here, we have this little ribbon cable that is connecting both parts here. And on the bottom side, we have part of the motherboard, and then up top here, you guys could see we have this little addition that houses some of our ports. Now, what is interesting is that right up here, we actually have a slot for a 2.5 millimeter SSD or hard drive. So yes, you can still use a traditional drive like that. So that is nice to be able to have cheap storage that you can add in. But apart from that, even though this has a 1 terabyte M.2 SSD, you can actually add another one because it has dual slots. So you guys can see under this ribbon cable right here, I'll be really careful with it. We have that additional slot right there, along with a little pad and a little piece of heatsink underneath. That's gonna cool it down, even in a small form factor like this. But that is actually not all, because if you look right here, we actually have slots for our RAM. So this comes with 32 gigs in this configuration for that $750 price tag. By the way, use the link down in the description. You might even be able to get an additional coupon on that, and we'll have our link as well, so check it out. You can actually remove this, so if you want more RAM, you can actually upgrade that as well, which is really cool. Now, what you guys do not see here is a heatsink, and that is because it is built into the underside of this tiny motherboard. And the way that it works is that it pulls in air from one side and pushes it out to the other side. Now, you might think that with a PC this small and it being, you know, a x86 based processor, it would be quite loud. Well, I was actually really surprised by how quiet it is. Of course, with the M2 Mac Mini, it also has a fan built in, and because of the Apple Silicon design, it does stay pretty much silent most of the time. Now, comparing the built-in SSD speeds, as far as write speeds, the Mac Mini's 1 terabyte option actually beats out the AS6, but as far as the read speeds, the AS6 beats out the Mac Mini, but that is the included one for that price tag. These slots though are actually PCI Express 4. So you can put in a faster SSD. Now, Apple, they will charge you $800 to go from the base storage up to 2 terabytes, which is the maximum that you can get internally. And that's one of the nice things about having a PC-based one is you get a lot of upgradability. Now, this thing also has a Wi-Fi 6E chip for that price tag, just like the Mac Mini. So that is a great thing. Now, the AS6 comes with Windows 11 Pro pre-installed, so that is a great thing. You get the upgraded operating system. Of course, the Mac Mini comes with Mac OS, and there are pros and cons to both systems. For example, I have many friends that work off of mini PCs because they need Windows for their professional workflows. And I also have friends, including us, that use Final Cut Pro for video editing, so we need Mac OS. But what about performance? Well, the M2 Mac Mini comes with the M2 chip, which is very powerful, and it is unbinned in the Mac Mini, which helps it out. And this thing has the AMD processor that is capped at 35 watts. As far as Geekbench 6, which has been updated and definitely shows the full performance of the M2 chip and single core score, both are over 2000, but the Mac Mini does beat it out. And as far as multi-core score, both are over 9,000. We have about 9,500 compared to 9,800. So the Mac Mini does beat it out, but with the 8 performance cores and then 16 threads, that does help it out in multi-core performance. As far as graphics performance, I ran Geekbench 6's longer graphics test, and the Mac Mini using Metal scores 44,000 with that unbinned graphics chip that is in there. Whereas the AS6, it gets about 27,000 using Vulkan. So the AS6 with that 6900HX and the 68M graphics, performance-wise, compares more so to the M1 Mac Mini, maybe slightly better in the CPU category. And so the Mac Mini overall overall is gonna get you better performance. Of course, we have that price difference and upgradability, and that is where Geekom is showing off this thing. Now, I also wanna mention, if you're buying one of these for the upgradability, for the ports, for the storage, things like that, and you don't care about performance that much, they actually have the AMD Ryzen 7 version, and that maximizes the value that you get. So I see these devices as two devices for different purposes. They're both very tiny, and as far as the Mac Mini is giving you a great value for the money, it's not the only thing that could be low priced and small if you're focusing on a small form factor. You guys let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you guys want to check this out, go ahead and use our link in the description below to get more info, more pricing, coupon details, things like that. Click that circle above to subscribe. Check out one of those videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next one.